it happened on a Tuesday, which in itself isn't a remarkable thing, except that I hadn't seen or spoken to Drew Marshall in nearly a decade, and out of nowhere, he showed up at my office lobby like a scene from a movie I didn't know I was starring in. 10 years is a long time to not speak to someone who once knew you better than anyone. We met our freshman year of college. Random roommates, a dorm the size of a closet, and a shared hatred for communal bathrooms brought us together. Drew was the loud one, confident, sharp, the kind of guy who made everyone feel like they were the center of the universe when he talked to them. I was the quieter one, more reserved, careful with words. He liked EDM and sleeveless gym tanks. I liked jazz and cardigans. But we worked. For 4 years, we were inseparable. Until we weren't. The last time I saw him was graduation day. We hugged, said the usual promises. Then life did what it does. It pulled us apart. I'd thought about him over the years, of course. Sometimes with nostalgia, sometimes with guilt, because there was something I never told him. Something I didn't even fully understand until years after. And now here he was, in the lobby of my building, texting me, "Come down, I'm here." No context, no warning, just a message that made my pulse quicken like I was 20 again. I took the elevator down, my heart thudding with every floor, and there he was, standing near the revolving doors like no time had passed. Same messy hair, though shorter now. Same easy smile. Same eyes that used to look at me like I was something more than I believed I was. "Hey," he said. "Drew." My voice cracked like an old record. "You got a minute?" We ended up at a cafe down the street. I asked what brought him to Chicago. He said he was in town for a conference. But it didn't take long before he leaned forward and said, "That's not why I came to see you." I blinked. "No," he shook his head. "I've wanted to say something for a long time. And I figured if I didn't now, I never would." There was a pause. The kind that hangs heavy in the air right before the ground shifts. "I had a crush on you in college," he said. I just stared at him. "I didn't realize it at the time," he continued. "Or maybe I did. I just didn't want to deal with what it meant. I didn't even really let myself think about it until years later. But it was there, the whole time. I think you knew." I didn't speak. I couldn't. My throat had closed up. "I know it's random, and I know it's been a long time, but I just needed you to know." I finally managed to ask, "Why now?" He smiled, not sadly, but like he was tired of holding something in. Because I've been thinking about that version of myself, us, in college, and I realized I never really moved on from it, from you, and I thought maybe if there was a chance you ever felt something too, even a little. I didn't say anything, not right away, because the thing was, he was right. I had felt it, and I'd buried it deep, convinced I was imagining it, that he was just being Drew, kind, close, affectionate in a way that wasn't supposed to mean anything. Because he was straight, because we were best friends, because I was scared. And now he was here, 10 years later, telling me I hadn't been crazy after all. I didn't know what to say. I think I blinked a few times, like that would help the words make sense. Maybe even reset the moment somehow, but it was real. Drew was sitting across from me, fingers wrapped around his coffee cup, eyes not moving from mine, and he just dropped a truth that rewired every memory I had stored away from college. I started, but the words felt thick in my throat. "Drew, I don't even know where to begin." He gave a small nod, like he understood. "You don't have to say anything, really. Look, I've carried it for so long, and I got tired of pretending it didn't matter. It does. It always has. My brain was doing that thing where it tried to replay every interaction we'd ever had, but through a new lens. Like, was that night sophomore year when we drank cheap whiskey on the roof and he leaned his head on my shoulder, more than just two friends drunk on nostalgia and booze? Or junior year when he bailed on a weekend trip with his girlfriend to stay in with me when I had the flu? Or all those times we shared a bed after parties, neither of us making it to the couch? How had I missed it? Or worse, how had I convinced myself none of it meant anything? I sat back in my chair, trying to breathe through the sudden pressure in my chest. "I thought you were straight," I said finally. It came out more accusatory than I meant it. "I thought I was too. Drew admitted, his smile tight. Or maybe I just needed to believe I was. I mean, I dated girls, I liked them. But with you, he looked down into his coffee. With you, it was different, and I didn't know how to process that, especially back then. I understood that part more than I wanted to admit. In college, I wasn't exactly out. My close friends knew. But Drew never asked, and I never offered. It was a don't ask, don't tell situation that felt safer at the time. Now I was 31, and so was he. And we were sitting in a cafe in Chicago like we hadn't spent a decade, ignoring the most important conversation we should have had. Do you remember that night senior year? I asked. Your birthday? We ended up watching that stupid movie you loved. What was it, Point Break? Drew chuckled. Classic cinematic masterpiece. You got drunk off those disgusting watermelon Smirnoffs because the bar ran out of your IPA. I blacked out halfway through Keanu's monologue, he added, grinning. No, I said, eyes narrowing. You didn't. That's the thing. You pretended to pass out, but you didn't. I know because when I got up to turn off the TV, you grabbed my hand. His smile faded. I always thought that moment was weird. I went on. You held my hand, and then you pulled it to your chest. You didn't say anything, and I figured maybe you were just hammered. But I never forgot it. Drew looked stunned. Not embarrassed, just surprised I remembered. I wasn't that drunk, he admitted. I remember that. I remember holding your hand and thinking, this is too much, he's going to pull away. But you didn't. No, I said quietly. I didn't. We stared at each other for a moment, and suddenly, I wasn't 31 anymore. I was 21 again, sitting in our dimly lit dorm with my best friend, full of unspoken feelings we didn't have the language or courage to explore. I had feelings too, I said, the words feeling foreign and familiar at the same time. I just didn't know what to do with them. I was scared, he said, not of being gay necessarily, just of losing you. If I said anything, if I messed it up, it felt like I'd destroy the one real thing in my life that mattered. You kinda did anyway, I said, softer than I intended. Not because of what you felt, but because you disappeared. Drew sighed, eyes drifting to the window beside us. I know, and I've thought about it every day since. Life got busy. And the more time passed, the harder it got to reach out. I figured you moved on. I nodded slowly. I did. Kind of. But I still thought about you. More than I'd like to admit. He looked at me again, and there was something raw in his eyes now. Hope, maybe. Or fear. Maybe both. So, he said, voice careful, what do we do with this now? I didn't answer right away. Because, honestly, I had no idea. We finished our coffee in silence. But it wasn't awkward. It felt more like the calm after a storm, the kind where everything's still standing, but nothing looks quite the same anymore. Outside, the late October wind picked up, rattling leaves along the sidewalk. We walked side by side toward the train station. When we stopped at the corner, he turned toward me. I'm in town until Friday, he said. I don't want to make this heavier than it needs to be, but if you want to see me again before I go, I'd like that. I looked at him, and for the first time in a long time, I let myself imagine the what-ifs. Okay, I said. Dinner tomorrow? His smile lit up his whole face. Yeah, that sounds good. Dinner the next night was at a small Italian place, a few blocks from my apartment. I picked it because it was quiet, the kind of place where you could actually hear someone's voice without shouting. Drew arrived right on time, looking effortlessly good in a dark button-down and jeans, the kind of casually perfect outfit that reminded me why I'd noticed him in the first place, back in college. Only now, there was something different in his presence. Less reckless, more controlled. And yet, the way he looked at me, I recognized it immediately. He was still the same Drew who had once held my hand without meaning to, who had smiled like the world revolved around me. We slid into a booth near the back, away from the few other diners. For a moment, it was awkward. Not tense exactly, but we were both acutely aware of the decade that had passed and the words that had finally been spoken. He looked down at the menu, and I noticed his fingers tapping lightly against it, almost as if he was trying to steady himself. "So," he said finally, glancing up, "this feels surreal, doesn't it?" "Yeah," I said, my voice lower than I intended. "Like we're stepping into a parallel universe where nothing happened for 10 years. He laughed softly. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again. And now you're here," I said, letting a small smile creep across my face. "And apparently it's my fault you've been carrying this secret for a decade." He shook his head. "No, I should have told you. I let pride and fear get in the way. I didn't want to risk our friendship." "You didn't," I said, watching him carefully. "You disappeared instead. And I felt that too, in my own way." He leaned back, studying me. "You're serious?" "Completely," I said, and I could feel my pulse quicken. There was something intoxicating about seeing him here, talking like this, as though no time had passed, and yet everything had changed. I had feelings too. I didn't know what to do with them. His eyes softened. "I'm glad I'm not the only one then, because honestly, for years I've thought about that night senior year, the one on the roof when we stayed up until 3 a.m., talking about everything and nothing. I remembered how your shoulder brushed mine, how I wanted to, I don't know, be closer, and I never admitted it. You were closer than you thought," I said, swallowing hard. "I remember it. I never forgot it." He reached over across the table, brushing his hand lightly against mine. My stomach flipped. 10 years of unanswered questions, suppressed feelings, and careful avoidance, all funneled into this single moment. His touch wasn't heavy or demanding. It was deliberate, gentle, almost tender, but it set off a spark that I couldn't ignore. "I've imagined this," he said quietly. "Not this dinner exactly, but I've imagined seeing you again, talking like we're not strangers, and maybe, just maybe, having a chance to explore what we didn't back then." My throat tightened. "I've imagined it too. I just didn't know if it was real or if I was lying to myself." He smiled softly, that familiar crooked grin I'd loved since freshman year. "It's real, I promise." We spent the next hour talking about everything. The jobs we had, the mistakes we'd made, the people we'd loved and lost. But all the while, there was an undercurrent running beneath the conversation. Something unspoken, something dangerous, something exciting. It was the awareness of possibility, of what could be. Every brush of his hand against mine, every lingering glance, made my heart race. I had to remind myself to breathe. When dessert arrived, a shared slice of tiramisu, we lingered. Drew leaned across the table, eyes locking with mine, and for a moment, the world outside the restaurant disappeared. It was just us. 10 years of missed opportunities, half-spoken feelings, and unacknowledged longing, all suspended in the warm glow of the candlelight. "I don't want this to end tonight," he whispered. "I don't want to walk out of here and pretend like we're just old friends catching up. I don't know more." "More?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Yeah," he said, his fingers brushing against mine again. "More than friendship, more than regrets, more than 10 years of wondering what could have been." I swallowed, heart hammering. "I want that too." The tension hung in the air like a live wire. We didn't kiss, not yet. But in that booth, in the quiet Italian restaurant, we both knew the rules had changed. The past had been acknowledged, the feelings confessed, and the door to what could be was wide open. It was terrifying and thrilling, and, somehow, exactly what I'd been waiting for all these years. When we finally stepped outside, the autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of leaves and distant rain. Drew hesitated for a moment, then turned to me. "So, what now?" I grinned, the same mix of excitement and nervousness I remembered from college. "Now, we find out." And that was the moment everything began to change. The next day, I couldn't focus. Not at work, not on emails, not even on the simple task of brewing my coffee without spilling it. Every little notification on my phone made my heart leap. Every minor sound outside my office window felt like it could be him. I'd replayed our dinner over and over, memorizing the weight of his gaze, the brush of his fingers against mine, the quiet words that had finally admitted a truth we'd both known for years. By late afternoon, I couldn't resist. I texted him, "Want to meet up before dinner? Just somewhere quieter." The reply was immediate. "Yes, let's meet at the park by the river. 6? Perfect." I left the office early, trying to calm the storm in my chest. I walked through the streets of Chicago, my coat pulled tight, but it wasn't the cold that had me shivering. It was anticipation, the same type of nervous energy I remembered from freshman year before a first date. Except this time, it was all the stakes of 10 years built up in a single night. I arrived early, leaning against a railing overlooking the water, watching the late sun reflect in glints off the river, and then he appeared. Drew. T-shirt under a casual jacket, jeans slightly frayed at the hem. He saw me instantly, that smile tugging at the corners of his mouth, the one that had gotten under my skin for years. We walked together along the riverside path, the conversation light at first. Work, mutual friends, trivial complaints about traffic and the temperature. But there was a current beneath every word, an electric charge that didn't need to be named. Every laugh made my chest tighten. Every glance, every casual brush as we passed benches felt intentional. Eventually, we reached a secluded spot, a small bend in the river with benches under a canopy of orange-tinged leaves. He stopped, turning to me. "I want to be honest," he said, voice low, catching the edge of the evening breeze. "I've thought about this moment for years, about seeing you again, about this." He gestured vaguely between us, and I understood. Not dinner, not conversation, but us. I swallowed. My mind raced through all the years, the crushes, the missed signals, the nights I'd lain awake wondering if he ever noticed the way I looked at him. "Me too," I admitted. "Every single day." Drew's hand found mine, fingers intertwining with a familiarity that should have felt impossible after 10 years apart. My chest tightened, breath caught. "You know," he said, "back in college, I didn't know how to deal with it. I thought I had to hide it, but now I don't care." The intensity of that moment made the world narrow down to just us. The river flowing quietly beside us, the gentle rustling of leaves, the distant hum of traffic, it all faded. I found myself leaning closer, drawn to him in a way I hadn't realized I still craved. His eyes held mine, searching, questioning, daring me to take the next step. "Diago?" I started, my voice barely audible. "I mean us?" Drew's lips curved into that half smile I knew too well, the one that always made me weak at the knees. "Yes," he said simply, and that was all the permission I needed. Our first kiss in 10 years was tentative, almost careful, like we were testing the waters of a river we'd both crossed countless times in our imaginations. Then, slowly, the hesitation melted away. The warmth of his lips, the weight of his hands resting lightly on my shoulders, the soft sigh he let out as our foreheads pressed together. It was everything I had missed and more. We pulled back slightly, breathless, forehead still touching. "I can't believe this is happening," I whispered. "Neither can I," he replied. 10 years, and it still feels like the first time. I laughed softly, shaking my head. "It's ridiculous, but I don't care." He grinned. "Good, because I don't either." We stayed there for a while, letting the quiet night envelop us. The world felt like it had reset, like the decade of distance, uncertainty, and unspoken feelings had been compressed into this single, perfect moment. And though the future was uncertain, I knew one thing. For the first time in 10 years, everything felt like it could finally be right. The next evening, Drew texted me while I was wrapping up at the office. "Want to come over? I've got wine, and maybe we can continue where we left off last night." My heart jumped. The casual phrasing barely masked the tension beneath it. the unspoken promise of what could happen. I grabbed my coat and left immediately, my mind racing with a mix of nerves and anticipation I hadn't felt in years. When I arrived at his apartment, the city was quiet, the street lamps casting golden pools of light across the pavement. He greeted me at the door, smiling like he'd been waiting for me, his eyes lighting up when he saw me. The way he looked, familiar and entirely new at the same time, made my pulse race. His apartment was cozy, minimalist, just like I remembered from college visits, but with subtle touches that made it feel lived in. A small stack of books by the sofa, a guitar leaning in the corner, a few framed photos of friends on the shelves. He poured us each a glass of wine and led me to the couch. We sat close, side by side, shoulders brushing, and for a moment neither of us spoke. The air was thick with expectation, a tension that had been building for 10 years and had finally found release. "I've thought about this," Drew said quietly, fingers tracing a line along the rim of his glass. "About us, about college, about every time I wanted to say something but didn't." I nodded, heart hammering. "Me too. I've replayed those years 1,000 times in my head, wondering what would have happened if we were braver, if I'd been braver." He turned toward me, eyes intense. "We're not kids anymore. We can be brave now." And then, without another word, he leaned in and kissed me. This kiss wasn't tentative. It was slow, deliberate, full of the pent-up longing and frustration of a decade. My body responded immediately, every nerve ending alive with awareness. I pressed closer, tangling my hands in his hair, feeling the warmth of him against me. The world outside faded entirely. There was only Drew, only the two of us rediscovering what had been buried for 10 years. After what felt like both an eternity and a heartbeat, we pulled back, foreheads resting together. "I can't believe it took us this long," I whispered. He laughed softly, a sound full of relief and wonder. "I know, but we're here now. That's what matters." We spent hours talking, kissing, holding each other. There were no rules, no rush, just a slow exploration of all the closeness we'd been missing. Every touch was loaded with meaning. Every look, a conversation we'd never had the courage to start in college. I traced the familiar lines of his face, memorizing the shape of his jaw, the curve of his smile, the way his eyes softened when he looked at me. At some point, the conversation faded, replaced by silence, the comfortable, charged silence of two people finally aligned. We ended up lying side by side on his couch, bodies pressed together, fingers intertwined. It was intimate, tender, and terrifying all at once. 10 years of missed opportunities and unspoken feelings hung between us, but now they were being claimed, piece by piece, with every soft kiss and lingering touch. Drew whispered my name, and I felt a shiver run through me. "I've wanted this for so long," he admitted. "Me too," I said, and meant it more than I could ever put into words. We fell asleep that night wrapped around each other, hearts pounding, aware that the next few days could change everything. But for the first time in 10 years, it felt like we were finally allowed to be honest, with each other and with ourselves. The following morning, I woke up to sunlight streaming through the blinds, feeling the warmth of Drew pressed against me. His hand was draped over my waist, and his chest rose and fell in rhythm with mine. For a fleeting second, I forgot where I was. Forgot the years of distance, the unanswered questions, the fear of moving forward. It was just us. In that quiet moment, the world outside paused. When Drew stirred and opened his eyes, his smile was lazy and genuine. "Morning," he whispered, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "Morning," I replied, voice hoarse from talking and kissing the night before. My heart was still hammering. Every inch of me remembered, every nerve alive, the tension between us thicker than ever. We stayed like that for a while, simply holding each other. Eventually, Drew spoke. "I've been thinking we have 10 years to catch up on. Not just about now, but everything. All the years we didn't see each other, all the things we didn't say." "I know," I said. "It's overwhelming, but in a good way." He leaned closer again, eyes locking with mine. "I don't want to waste any more time. Not on pretending, not on wondering. If we're doing this, I want it all. The closeness, the touch, everything we didn't have back then. A shiver ran down my spine. You mean, like, now? Drew's grin was mischievous but sincere. Yes. If you're willing, I nodded. I am. We spent the day together, slowly, intentionally. Our conversations meandered from past regrets to the minutiae of our daily lives, but every word, every laugh, every lingering touch carried weight. We walked along the river, shoulders brushing, hands occasionally intertwining without conscious thought. The small, familiar gestures, the way he looked at me, the way our laughter intertwined, made it impossible to ignore the electricity between us. By evening, we found ourselves back at his apartment. Drew poured us both a glass of wine, and we sat on the couch, knees almost touching. The room was dimly lit, cozy, the quiet hum of the city outside serving as a backdrop. He reached for my hand again, and I let him. This time, there was no hesitation, no tentative testing of boundaries. Our lips met, a slow, lingering kiss that deepened the further it went. I felt the tension of 10 years dissolve into that moment, replaced with the awareness of everything we'd been holding back. Hours passed in a blur of kisses, touches, whispered confessions, and the careful exploration of each other's bodies, testing limits we hadn't dared approach in college. Every movement felt both familiar and new, like relearning a rhythm we had always known but had never fully played together. Eventually, exhaustion overtook us. We lay intertwined on the couch, hearts pounding, breaths mingling. The room was quiet, except for the faint sound of the city outside and our slowly slowing heartbeats. Drew brushed his fingers across my arm, tracing idle patterns. You know, he murmured, I've waited a long time for this. For us? I know, I whispered back, pressing my forehead to his. Me too. In that moment, I realized something fundamental. We had been given a second chance, not just at exploring a relationship, but at understanding each other, at finally being honest about the feelings that had shaped our lives. And unlike college, there were no distractions, no fears of judgment, only the two of us and the years we were finally ready to reclaim. As sleep pulled us under, still entwined, I knew the coming days would be a mix of laughter, discovery, and maybe even awkwardness as we navigated this new chapter. But for the first time in 10 years, I felt certain about one thing. I didn't want to waste another second without him. The next few days felt surreal. Drew stayed in town longer than he initially planned, and we filled our time together with the kind of ordinary moments that felt extraordinary because we were sharing them. Morning coffee in the sunlit kitchen, long walks along the river discussing work, ambitions, and regrets. But beneath it all, there was an undercurrent of tension, an unspoken question. Could we truly bridge a decade of separation and uncertainty? One night, after a long walk under the amber glow of streetlights, we found ourselves back at his apartment. Silence stretched between us, but it was the comfortable kind, the type that only exists when two people have known each other deeply. Drew reached out, brushing a loose strand of hair from my face. His hand lingered longer than necessary, and I felt my pulse jump. I'm scared, he admitted quietly, his eyes searching mine. I've waited 10 years to feel this again, but what if it doesn't work? What if we're not who we used to be? I cupped his face in my hands, thumbs brushing against his cheekbones. Drew, we've changed, yes. We're older, wiser, maybe a little more cautious, but I don't care about that. I care about this moment, about you, about us. A smile slowly spread across his face, tentative at first, then warmer as he leaned into my touch. The vulnerability in his eyes, the honesty in his voice, made my heart swell. I want this, he whispered. I want us, even if it's messy. We kissed again, slow, deliberate, full of all the longing we had suppressed for 10 years. This time, there was no hesitation, no fear, only a raw, beautiful connection that felt both familiar and entirely new. Our hands roamed freely, exploring the contours of familiarity we had been denied for so long. Every touch, Every whispered name was an acknowledgement of the decade of feelings that had never truly gone away. Hours passed in a haze of warmth, laughter, soft kisses, and intimate confessions. We learned new things about each other, habits, preferences, fears, dreams, but the foundation was the same, the deep, unshakable bond that had survived time and distance. Eventually, we collapsed into the couch again, bodies tangled, hearts racing. Drew's hand rested on my chest, fingers tracing patterns as we caught our breath. "You know," he said softly, "I've spent 10 years wondering if this moment would ever come, and now that it has." His voice trailed off, but his eyes said everything. I pressed my forehead to his. "I know, I've been wondering too, and now we have it. We have each other." He smiled, that perfect, crooked grin that had once made my stomach flip in college. 10 years later, and it still feels like the first time. I laughed softly, holding him closer. Better late than never. We spent the rest of the night wrapped around each other, speaking in whispers, laughing at old memories, and planning for a future that had suddenly become possible. 10 years had passed, but the love that had always existed between us had finally found its moment to breathe, to thrive, to be claimed. For the first time in a decade, I slept, knowing that this time, it wasn't just a fleeting feeling, a secret crush, or a missed opportunity. It was real. And it was ours. The weekend Drew stayed in Chicago flew by in a blur of laughter, long talks, and moments that left me breathless. By Friday, reality had started pressing back in, the commitments, the jobs, the separate lives we had built over the past 10 years. And yet, nothing about our time together felt fleeting. Every second had been a reclamation of what we lost, every touch a promise that the past wouldn't dictate our future. Friday night, we went for a walk along the lakefront. The city lights reflected on the water, the waves gently lapping against the shore. We walked in silence at first, fingers interlaced, hearts synchronizing in a rhythm that felt impossibly natural. I looked at him, really looked, and saw every trace of the boy I had loved in college, in the man he had become, the confidence, the warmth, the familiarity of a soul I had always known. "I wish this didn't have to end," I said quietly. Drew squeezed my hand. It doesn't have to end. 10 years apart doesn't erase what we have now." I laughed softly, a mix of relief and disbelief. "We really are doing this, huh?" "We are," he said. "We're finally brave enough to not let life get in the way. We're finally honest enough to take the chance we never had." I stopped walking and turned to him, eyes searching his. "And you mean that? Even with everything, the distance, the time apart, the mistakes?" Drew cupped my face in his hands. "Every word. I've spent years imagining this, and now that it's real, I'm never letting it go." We kissed then, slow and steady, the kind of kiss that held years of longing, regret, and finally, hope. It wasn't just a kiss, it was a vow that we weren't just revisiting old feelings. We were building something new, something that had been waiting patiently for a decade to finally come alive. Later, back at my apartment, we stayed up talking, planning, dreaming. We made lists of all the things we wanted to do together, trips we wanted to take, and even mundane things, laundry, Sunday brunches, late-night movies. It felt grounding, the way ordinary life suddenly became extraordinary when shared with someone who truly knew your heart. Before Drew left the next morning, we stood by the door, the city quiet and still outside. He took my hands in his and held them tight. "I'll be back soon," he said softly, voice thick with emotion. "And when I do, I want this to be just the beginning." I smiled, heart full. "Me too. No more waiting 10 years, okay?" He laughed, leaning in for one last kiss before pulling back. "No more waiting." As I watched him walk down the street, my pulse still racing, I realized something. 10 years had tried to shape us, to keep us apart, to bury feelings under the weight of life. But the truth, the bond we shared, had survived it all. And now, finally, we could step forward together. For the first time in a decade, I felt like the world was exactly as it should be, unpredictable, thrilling, and full of love that had waited patiently for the right moment to bloom. And I knew, without a shadow of doubt, that I was ready to spend every day making up for the 10 years we lost, and every single day after that.